Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to today's reading from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. We are reading from Adi Lila, chapter 5. We'll be reading from verse 154. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat kripatamham bande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hari Om Tat Sat. Krishna and Balaram present themselves as younger brother and elder brother, but in the scriptures they are described as the original Supreme Personality of Godhead and His expansion. Verse 155. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who by his various plenary portions appears in the world in different forms and incarnations such as Lord Ram, but who personally appears in his supreme original form as Lord Krishna. Purport: this is a quotation from Brahma Samhita 5.39. Verse 156. Lord Chaitanya is the same Lord Krishna and Lord Nityananda is Lord Balaram. Lord Nityananda fulfills all of Lord Chaitanya's desires. Verse 157. The ocean of Lord Nityananda's glories is infinite and unfathomable. Only by his mercy can I touch even a drop of it. Verse 158. Please listen to another glory of his mercy. He made a fallen living entity climb to the highest limit. Verse 159. To disclose it is not proper, for it should be kept as confidential as the Vedas, yet I shall speak of it to make his mercy known to all. Verse 160. O Lord Nityananda, I write of your mercy out of great exultation. Please forgive me for my offenses. Verse 161. Lord Nityananda Prabhu had a servant named Sri Meenaketana Ramadas, who was a reservoir of love. Verse 162. At my house there was a Sankirtan day and night, and therefore he visited there, having been invited. Verse 163. Absorbed in emotional love, he sat in my courtyard, and all the Vaishnavas bowed down at his feet. Verse 164. In a joyful mood of love of God, he sometimes climbed upon the shoulder of some offering obeisances, and sometimes he struck others with his flute or mildly slapped them. Verse 165. When someone saw the eyes of Meenaketana Ramadas, tears would automatically flow from his own eyes, for a constant shower of tears flowed from the eyes of Meenaketana Ramadas. Verse 166. Sometimes there were eruptions of ecstasy like kadamba flowers on parts of his body, and sometimes one limb would be stunned while another would be trembling. Verse 167. Whenever he shouted aloud the name Nityananda, the people around him were filled with great wonder and astonishment. Verse 168. One respectable Brahman named Sri Gunar Nava Mishra was serving the deity. Verse 169. When Meenaketana was seated in the yard, this Brahmana did not offer him respect. Seeing this, Sri Ramdas became angry and spoke. Verse 170. Here I find the second Roma Harshana Sutta, who did not stand to show honor when he saw Lord Balaram. And we know this pastime when Roma Harshana was vanquished just by the small straw thrown by Lord Balaram. Verse 171. After saying this, he danced and sang to his heart's content, but the Brahmana did not become angry, for he was then serving Lord Krishna. Purport: Meenaketana Ramdas was a great devotee of Lord Nityananda. When he entered the house of Krishnadas Kaviraja, Gunarnava Mishra, the priest who was worshipping the deity installed in the house, did not receive him very well. A similar event occurred when Romaharshana Sutta was speaking to the great assembly of sages at Naimisharanya. Lord Baldev entered and had no great respect for Lord Nityananda, and this idea was not at all palatable to Meena Ketana Ramdas. For this reason, the mentality of Meena Ketana Ramdas is never deprecated by devotees. Verse 172. At the end of the festival, Meena Ketana Ramdas went away offering his blessings to everyone. At that time, he had some controversy with my brother. Verse 173. My brother had firm faith in Chaitanya, Lord Chaitanya, but only a dim glimmer of faith in Lord Nityananda. Verse 174. Knowing this, Sri Ramadas felt unhappy in his mind. I then rebuked my brother. Verse 175. These two brothers, I told him, are like one body. They are identical manifestations. If you do not believe in Lord Nityananda, you will fall down. Verse 176. If you have faith in one but disrespect the other, your logic is like the logic of accepting half a hen. Verse 177. It would be better to be an atheist by slighting both brothers than a hypocrite by believing in one and slighting the other. Verse 178. Thus Sri Ramdas broke his flute in anger and went away, and at that time my brother fell down. Verse 179. I have thus described the power of the servants of Lord Nityananda. Now I shall describe another characteristic of his mercy. Verse 180. That night Lord Nityananda appeared to me in a dream because of my good quality in chastising my brother. Verse 181. In the village of Jamatpura, which is near Nehati, Lord Nityananda appeared to me in a dream. Purport. There is now a railway line to Jamatpura. If one wants to go there, he can take a train on the Katua railway line and go directly to the station known as Salar. From that station, one can go directly to Jamatpura. Verse 182. I fell at his feet offering my obeisances, and he then placed his own lotus feet upon my head. Verse 183. Arise, get up, he told me again and again. Upon arising, I was greatly astonished to see his beauty. Verse 184. He had a glossy blackish complexion, and his tall, strong, heroic stature made him like Cupid himself. Verse 185. He had beautifully formed hands, arms and legs, and eyes like lotus flowers. He wore a silk cloth with a silk turban on his head. Verse 186. He wore golden earrings on his ears and golden armlets and bangles. He wore tinkling anklets on his feet and a garland of flowers around his neck. Verse 187. His body was anointed with sandalwood pulp, and he was nicely decorated with tilak. His movements surpassed those of a maddened elephant. Verse 188. His face was more beautiful than millions upon millions of moons, and his teeth were like pomegranate seeds because of his chewing beetle. Verse 189. His body moved to and fro, right and left, for he was absorbed in ecstasy. He chanted Krishna, Krishna in deep voice. Verse 190. His red stick moving in his hand, he seemed like a maddened lion. All around the four sides of his feet were bumblebees. Verse 191. His devotees dressed like cowherd boys surrounded his feet like so many bees, and also chanted Krishna, Krishna, absorbed in ecstatic love. Verse 192. Some of them played horns and flutes, and others danced and sang. Some of them offered betel nuts, and others waved chamar fans about him. Verse 193. Thus I saw such opulence in Lord Nityananda's Swarup. His wonderful form, qualities and pastimes are all transcendental. Verse 194, I was overwhelmed with transcendental ecstasy, not knowing anything else. Then Lord Nityananda smiled and spoke to me as follows. Verse 195, O my dear Krishna Das, do not be afraid. Go to Vrindavan, for there you will attain all things. Verse 196, after saying this, he directed me toward Vrindavan by waving his hand, then he disappeared with his associates. Verse 197, I fainted and fell to the ground, my dream broke, and when I regained consciousness, I saw that morning had come. Verse 198, I thought about what I had seen and heard and concluded that the Lord had ordered me to proceed to Vrindavan at once. Verse 199, that very second I started for Vrindavan, and by His mercy I reached there in great happiness. Verse 200, all glory to Lord Nityananda Balarama, by whose mercy I have attained shelter in the transcendental abode of Vrindavan. Verse 201, all glory to the merciful Lord Nityananda, by whose mercy I have attained shelter at the lotus feet of Sri Rupa and Sri Sanatan. Verse 202, by his mercy I have attained the shelter of great personality Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, and by his mercy I have found the refuge of Sri Swarup Damodar. Purport, anyone desiring to become expert in the service of Sri Radha and Krishna should always aspire to be under the guidance of Swarup Damodar Goswami, Rupa Goswami, Sanatan Goswami and Raghunath Das Goswami. To come under the protection of the Goswamis, one must get the mercy and grace of Nityananda Prabhu. The author has tried to explain this fact in these two verses. I'll repeat the purport. Anyone desiring to become expert in the service of Sri Radha and Krishna should always aspire to be under the guidance of Swarup Damodar Goswami, Rupa Goswami, Sanatan Goswami and Raghunath Das Goswami. To come under the protection of Goswamis, one must get the mercy and grace of Nityananda Prabhu. The author has tried to explain this fact in these two verses. Verse 203, by the mercy of Sanatan Goswami, I have learned the final conclusions of devotional service, and by the grace of Sri Rupa Goswami, I have tasted the highest nectar of devotional service. Purport, Sri Sanatan Goswami Prabhu, the teacher of the science of devotional service, wrote several books, of which Brihad Bhagavatamrita is very famous. Anyone who wants to know about the subject matter of devotees, devotional service and Krishna must read this book. Sanatan Goswami, who also wrote a special commentary on the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, known as Dasham Tippani, which is so excellent that by reading it one can understand very deeply the pastimes of Krishna in his exchanges of loving activities. Another famous book by Sanatan Goswami is the Hari Bhakti Vilas, which states the rules and regulations for all divisions of Vaishnavas, namely Vaishnav householders, Vaishnav brahmacharis, Vaishnav vanaprasth and Vaishnav sannyasis. This book was especially written, however, for Vaishnav householders. Sri Raghunath Das Goswami has described Sanatan Goswami in his prayer Vila Kusumanjali verse 6, where he has expressed his obligation to Sanatan Goswami in the following words. Vairagya Yug Bhakti Rasam Prayatner Apayayan Mam Anabhipsam Andham Kripam Buddhim Yah Para Dukkha Dukhe Sanatanas Tam Prabhum Ashrayami. I was unwilling to drink the nectar of devotional service, possessed of renunciation, but Sanatan Goswami, out of his causeless mercy, made me drink it, even though I was otherwise unable to do so. Therefore, he is an ocean of mercy. He is very compassionate to fallen souls like me, and thus it is my duty to offer my respectful obeisances unto his lotus feet. Krishnadas Kaviraja Goswami, also in the last section of Chaitanya Charitamrita, specifically mentions the names of Rupa Goswami, Sanatan Goswami and Srila Jiva Goswami and offers his respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of these three spiritual masters. As well as Raghunath Das, Srila Raghunath Das Goswami also accepted Sanatan Goswami as a teacher of the science of devotional service. Srila Rupa Goswami is described as the Bhakti Rasacharya, or one who knows the essence of devotional service. His famous book Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is the science of devotional service, and by reading this book one can understand the meaning of devotional service. Another of his famous books is the Ujjvala Nilamani. In this book he elaborately explains the loving affairs and transcendental activities of Lord Krishna and Radharani. Verse 204. All glory to the lotus feet of Lord Nityananda, by whose mercy I have attained Sri Radha Govinda. Srila Narottam Das Thakur, who is famous for his poetic composition known as Prarthana, has lamented in one of his prayers, "When will Lord Nityananda be merciful upon me, so that I will forget all material desires?" Srila Narottam Das Thakur confirms that unless one is freed from material desires to satisfy the needs of the body and senses, one cannot understand the transcendental abode of Lord Krishna, Vrindavan. He also confirms that one cannot understand the loving affairs of Radha and Krishna without going through the direction of the 6 Goswamis. In other words, Narottam Das Thakur has stated that without the causeless mercy of Nityananda Prabhu, one cannot enter into the affairs of Radha and Krishna. Verse 205. I am more sinful than Jagai and Madhai, and even lower than the worms in the stool. Verse 206. Anyone who hears my name loses the results of his pious activities. Anyone who utters my name becomes sinful. Verse 207. Who in this world but Nityananda could show his mercy to such abominable person as me? Verse 208. Because he is intoxicated by ecstatic love and is an incarnation of mercy, he does not distinguish between the good and the bad. Verse 209. He delivers all those who fall down before him. Therefore he has delivered such a sinful and fallen person as me. Verse 210. Although I am sinful and I am the most fallen, he has conferred upon me the lotus feet of Sri Rupa Goswami. Verse 211. I am not fit to speak all these confidential words, but my visiting Lord Madan Gopal and Lord Govinda. Verse 212. Lord Madan Gopal, the chief deity of Vrindavan, is the enjoyer of the rasa dance and is directly the son of King of Braja. Verse 213. He enjoys the rasa dance with Srimati Radharani, Sri Lalita and others. He manifests himself as the Cupid of Cupids. Verse 214. Wearing yellow garments and decorated with a flower garland, Lord Krishna, appearing among the gopis with his smiling lotus face, looked directly like the charmer of the heart of Cupid. Purport: this is the quotation from Srimad Bhagavatam 10.32.2. Verse 215. With Radha and Lalita serving him on his 2 sides, he attracts the hearts of all by his own sweetness. Verse 216. The mercy of Lord Nityananda showed me Sri Madan Mohan and gave me Sri Madan Mohan as my Lord and Master. Verse 217. He granted to one as low as me the sight of Lord Govinda. Lord, words cannot describe this, nor is it fit to be disclosed. Verse 218 and 19. On an altar made of gems in the principal temple of Vrindavan, amidst a forest of desires, Lord Govinda, the son of King of Braja, sits upon the throne of gems and manifests his full glory and sweetness, thus enchanting the entire world. Verse 220. By his left side is Srimati Radharani and her personal friends, with whom Lord Govinda enjoys the Rasa Leela and many other pastimes. So we'll continue from here onwards next time. Thank you for joining. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.